I like biographies in general. Biographies, I think, are really, really interesting read.
What you learn from them?
Well, I think you learn a lot depending upon whose life you're reading about. There are lots of lessons in there.
Particularly if it's a non-fiction book, are you taking the new knowledge and sort of attaching it to the knowledge you have? And for me, taking notes helps make sure that I'm really thinking hard about what's in there.
All the time. I'm really into books. I'm into the part. Right now, I'm into Mastering the Art of War, The Art of War. I just found all these new books.
There was always one, that kind of serendipity that you get from just wandering around bookshelves looking at book covers is a kind of a yet another kind of serendipity. And I think that's part of what we're trying to do.
I just read and read and read. I probably read 5 to 6 hours a day. I don't read as fast now as when I was younger, but I read.
And I would say reading is the strongest signal for success in the future that I've ever seen. It is the strongest.
Read, write, read. If the president were here, one of his greatest strengths is reading. That's one of the reasons why he's a good communicator, why he's such a good writer. He's a voracious reader.
Oh my God, I love Michelle Obama. She's so smart. And all those other successful people think reading and literature are so important to our daily lives. What do you think about it, Wendy?
Yeah, totally. I think it exposes tons of new perspectives, and I think it just connects humanity as a whole.
Welcome.
This is our kind of podcast featuring Wendy and Shireen.
Yeah, but anyways, Wendy, what you said about literature adding perspective, you're so right. I think it definitely exposes us to new, point of views.
Yeah, and I think, I guess more generally speaking, it just connects more people as a whole. Literature is something that we all share and that we can all have access to.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking about my own life and experiences. Reading definitely puts me in situations that I literally never would have thought of.
Yeah, totally. I think it helps us understand a lot of the tensions that exist within certain groups and why people just don't seem to get along sometimes.
Yeah, no, you're so right. These pieces of literature are so crucial to understanding the conditions of people's lives throughout history and even now.
And I know we've all read our fair share of books about slavery or segregation or the Holocaust, but these pieces of history embalmed within pieces of literature creates an outlet for people to understand a more personal perspective about these subjects instead of just reading straight out of a history textbook.
Yeah, the reason so many people rose against these vile human rights violations is because they were forced to see the perspective of others through this reading. Personally, if I hadn't been exposed to these pieces, I probably wouldn't have given the history a second thought because I didn't have to personally experience it.
And speaking of experiencing different things, let's get into our next subtopic, which is diversity of thought.
Yeah, reading definitely makes us rethink our predispositions about the world around us. It can transport you to a different country or even a different era of time.
When you think about a lot of these huge historical movements involving social justice, like the civil rights or abolitionist movements, literature definitely played a huge role.
And it's not even just about those historical movements. We can see how literature impacts us today in the modern world through Black Lives Matter protests and white privilege, which wouldn't have gained so much momentum without sources of literature.
Yeah, totally. Literature, or I guess more broadly reading, transcends barriers of communication. You reach a way larger audience through books. We can't really ignore the huge role impactful works of literature played in fostering many of these huge historical and modern movements.
Even going along with diversity of thought, we can't ignore that a lot of these issues are being perpetuated by social systems. Studying these systems are essential to understanding how humans work together.
And no matter what scale they are, whether they're community-based or locally based or even governmentally based, analyzing these systems can reveal how many of our problems are in fact systemic.
Yeah, some systemic issues, while they're not completely eradicated, have been recognized by works of literature, and it's definitely helped us subside the issues that come along with them.
And I think it's super, super important that people read about these historic governmental or social systems, I guess, in order to prevent the same mistakes from occurring again, just like they tell us in history class.
Yeah, and remember when we read Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad in class in relation to imperialism? It was a unique novel that was written in the perspective of the colonizer rather than the colonized, which was really different from the novels that had been written at the time.
Yeah, and it was also written during the transitional period into the post-colonial era, which made it especially nuanced and difficult to unpack. Because not only did it attempt to reveal the problematic nature of imperialist ideals, it was inherently problematic in nature.
While it depicted the abominable conditions of Native Africans during this era, the main protagonist continued to call the civilians that lived there savages and believed that they were in need of saving. Before reading Heart of Darkness, one may have believed that every single privileged man should advocate against imperial ideologies.
And, you know, I'm really glad that we got to read and unpack this novel. It definitely wasn't an easy read, but I think it's important to examine novels that seem to lie in the gray area, quote unquote, in terms of what they're advocating for. It offers a more realistic and complex perspective into a lot of the problems that we have faced, are facing, and continue to face.
Not only does studying literature expose problems within our social systems and give us insight into new perspectives, it also has been relevant for such a long time and through different events in history because it's so unique to humans and ultimately connects us as a whole.
Yeah, totally. At the end of the day, literature is just another example of individualistic expression and therefore can't really be replicated. It's a super, super important aspect to our culture.
Yeah, humanity continues to develop over time because we have been always trying to understand each other in new ways and gain insight about others' lives. Literature is essential to creating the bridge between different ways of thinking and different mindsets.
And the skills and knowledge that we gain from high school English classes are applicable in the real world. We don't simply read to read, we read to understand. And the use of critical thinking skills is imperative in order to succeed.
We can see how these characteristics are displayed in many parts of our daily lives. Critical thinking is used in almost every conversation, even this one. People have to analyze the tone and atmosphere of their surroundings.
Yeah, like at job interviews, like you're not going to talk to me like you're talking to me right now. But at the end of the day, literature is just another way to see what the people before you have done. There are so many universal themes that we can all identify with and apply to our daily lives that are present in the books that we read every day.
I often see students, or actually any person, seek validation of these universal truths that you're talking about through the novels that they read. Authors describe their own personal experiences through their writing, and people who aren't comfortable about their own thoughts may find familiarity in these types of literature.
Yeah, just like art or dance or music, literature is just another outlet for self expression. Many find that writing offers them a voice or a place to be truly heard and understood.
Yeah, these authors, they're just able to talk about almost anything without the fear of limitations or judgment.
Yeah, and people can unmask their full potential when given the opportunity to create without limitations. By doing so, we produce valuable pieces of information that help progress society as a whole.
Yeah, like don't you remember about the burning of that library, Alexandria, I think? The information we lost from that library alone set us back about 1,000 years, I've heard, like from different historians.
Yeah, and that's just one example of what would happen if such a crucial outlet were taken away from people. The only way for society to progress and develop is through the knowledge of others. We constantly, constantly build upon one another in order to find new solutions to new problems.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can really obviously see the impact that mathematicians and journalists have on our communities and education as a whole. But a lot of people fail to recognize the importance of fictitious point of views in literature as well.
A particularly influential piece of fictional work is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which we studied this year. Not only did the novel spark a Hollywood remake and has become the blueprint for many, many Halloween-themed ideas, the novel itself was full of valuable insight into many, many important real-world topics.
Yeah, I think I personally and the class learned so much about how traumatic experiences can lead to irrational behaviors through a perspective that no one would have thought of if it weren't written down in the novel. The monster's creation and action throughout the novel depict humanistic characteristics and how his emotions fueled his revenge and regret. Hey Wendy, you know what I think would be a super fun activity to display how literature connects all of us in humanity?
Oh my god, what?
We should have the audience create a 1 or 2 sentence alternative ending to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Now that you're all done with your alternative endings, we can see how literature connects us all and visualize how it's completely unique to humans.
So to summarize some ending words, we obviously think literature is incredibly relevant to people today.
And thank you for listening to our podcast.
Bye.
Bye.